This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we have a guest that knows a thing or two about Dynasty Fantasy Football. You can find him at the Undroppables and hosting the Undrafted podcast. You know him as Jax Falcone. It's the one and only Scott Boulanger. Welcome to the show, my man.
Well said, brother. Well said. You introduced me perfect. That's exactly it.
Yeah, I've seen your content, heard your content, listened to stuff for years, and it's awesome to have you here. I'm excited.
Thank you.
Dive deep into some Dynasty talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited to be here. You're doing awesome work, and I kind of went back and checked out some of your stuff, and you do it nicely. So I'm excited to be here with. And by the way, you sent me a lot of questions and very, very thoughtful. So I'm excited to be here as well.
Well, I'm excited to dive in. So, for listeners and viewers that might be unfamiliar with what you're doing, what is your role with the Undroppables, and what is the Undrafted podcast all about?
Well, I mean, my role, I think I call myself the resident shit talker. It depends on where I'm at. If I'm on Twitter, we're definitely we're talking shit basically, right? A lot of sarcasm, VP of sarcasm there. We have a lot of fun on Twitter, but the Undrafted pod is what I mainly do. I co-own the Undroppables with Chalk and Tommy, and the three of us kind of hold different pillars of the website and the media enterprise, if you would call it such a thing. But I do the Undrafted pod. That's the content I create. As you know, doing a weekly show is a lot of work. It's not just turn on the mic and go. There's preparation and guest booking and all the rest of it, and it's more than you want it to be sometimes. But if it's a show people love, it's worth putting out there. So
Yeah, talk to me about the Undroppables. Obviously, the brand. From a consumer perspective, what do you love most about what the Undroppables produces? And talk to me about the crew, because you mentioned Tommy, you mentioned Chalk. What an amazing team you have over there.
Well, thank you. The idea for the Undroppables has been a place for other content creators to find their footing, right? To actually have a platform to content create from, and that's been the thing that that's the vision. That's the vision of what it is. It's, and we've had a lot of people kind of go from the Undroppables to very bigger and better things, and that's really neat. So, we do rankings, pods. I think the newest undertaking that's been a really fun project that's really created a lot of avenues for people to create content has been our Uncovered. And Uncovered is basically team by team. So each team has their own sort of show, both a podcast and a YouTube video. And there's no prerequisite for, experience needed. Some of the people who do the shows have a lot of experience, quite frankly, and some are brand new. And ultimately, it's like just having that opportunity to have a show about your favorite team. We wanted all 32 teams, and we'll see how it grows from there.
Nice. And you've had some fun collaborations, like with Player Profiler. You just hosted the Sonic Truth podcast, right?
Yeah, one to the next, baby. My show appears on the Player Profiler network. Obviously, they're doing a lot of great work, and we're happy to be sort of partnered with them, for lack of a better term. And Theo's been a longtime friend of mine, and he's doing basically everything over there. He's sort of man hauling a lot of work, and Matt Kelly, obviously a very, very popular name out in the streets, and Player Profiler, very highly visited website, and very, very neat stuff. But we're our own thing, but we love partnering with them.
I love it. Now, before we go any further, where did the name Jax Falcone come from? What's the origin to that?
Trade secrets. Can't give it away at all, baby. Can't give away at all. I mean, honestly, it's so stupid that the story. It's better for me to just not say anything than to just tell you it's a trade secret.
That's fair. No, I love that. It's awesome. Obviously, you bring a ton of passion to fantasy sports. Where did it start for you when it comes to just growing up as a fan? Like, who are your favorite teams and players growing up?
Dude, that's a great question. I mean, the one thing that we said at the Undroppables was this is a passion project. And so if it ever stops being fun, we are going to stop doing it. And so that guiding principle allows us to really move fast when we're not having fun. Like, in other words, it's like, wait, we're going to stop. We're done. And then we just move in a different direction so that it's constantly fun. And, if a passion project becomes not fun, I don't know what that is. That's the opposite of a passion project. But, where it started for me, I mean, I can remember being, I'm 47. I can remember, in it got to be right around 1980. I mean, as early as my memories go, in a little, onesie nighty, pajamas, whatever, Dallas Cowboy pajamas that my dad put me in, watching, Danny White against the Washington Redskins, as they were, called back then. And, Charlie Brown was the receiver, Art Monk, and the whole thing. I mean, I can remember, going way back, and just, the nighttime of watching those games was just incredible. I also can remember, I had older brothers and sisters. I can remember going to high school games, watching, high school football, and thought that was the greatest thing of all time. That, when I was just a kid, I don't know, 5, 6 years old or something. And I looked on that field and I said, I'm going to do that. And lo and behold, I did end up becoming the quarterback for my high school football team. But, I just remember from an early age being like, this is what I want to do. And, so in a lot of ways, maybe taking career away from football probably wasn't even the best thing. I think it, coming back to this and being here is exactly what I love. I mean, I just love the game of football, watching it, playing it, betting on it, talking about it, you name it. So I think that's why people watch your program, my program. They just can't get enough. And that's what makes it so much fun.
I love it. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Northeast, so I'm a New England Patriots fan.
Okay.
Celtics, Boston Bruins, Boston Red Sox. Although I will say I was born a Cowboy fan. My dad, and one of my brothers, both of my brothers are half Cowboy fans. They say they're Patriots fans, but they'll talk Patriots every now and again. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? But so so I'm a Boston guy through and through. Of course, I live here in sunny California now.
Yeah. So as a sports fan, what's the worst loss you ever experienced, and what's your favorite all-time sports moment?
I mean, the worst loss is clearly the Patriots losing to the Giants in the Super Bowl when they were going to go 19-0. That was that. We didn't even see the knife, right? They say the best way to kill a sheep is so they don't even see the knife. Next thing you know, you're dead. That was us. We just didn't see it. I can remember Plaxico Burress before the game said something like he predicted the final score. I think it was like 20-17. He said, and ended up being 17-14, whatever the case was. And Brady heard that and he said, we're only going to score 17. I remember he said that and I was like, oh shit, don't do this. And sure enough, 17-14, unbelievable, absolute agony. I can remember watching that. I was actually in California at the time, and I had a bunch of California people around me. It wasn't back home in Boston. I can remember just like people didn't give a shit. They were like, whatever. And I'm like in my own misery all by myself.
Oh.
It was brutal. Yeah. Brutal.
Well, how about your favorite sports moment?
Well, look, it's baseball. It's, before I moved to California, we were down 3-0 to the hated Yankees. And, we hadn't won a World Series since 1918. And, Dave Roberts steals second. That was a great game. But I was actually at the following evening. I was at the last home game of that series where David Ortiz walked it off. It was the game before the game I was at, game 4, as it were, was the longest game by time in Major League postseason history, followed by the longest game in Major League postseason history. The two longest games in history, just excruciating extra inning games where I was, walking in a circle, at Fenway Park, watching my Sox come back and eventually go win the World Series.
Yeah, playoff baseball will do that to you, especially with a tradition and history like the Red Sox. Every New Englander I ever talked to or interview on this show, that's the game, or that's the series that they point to for sure. So when along your path did you discover fantasy sports?
Early on, man, I can remember going way back with Eric Karabell and Brandon Funston and all the guys at at Yahoo years ago when they were just young guys, and so this was the late 90s, early 2000s. So I've been kind of playing fantasy football that whole time. And as soon as it became something that you could do on the computer, once I knew what a computer was, I guess that's what we started doing. So yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, I love it. I'd say Funston, definitely one of the oldest ones I remember too back in the day. And it's
what's crazy? So my first Scott Fish Bowl, I was drafting back to back with Funston. I was like, look at this.
See, that's the world I'm talking about. He's a Northwestern or a Pacific Northwest guy like me.
Yeah.
And I hosted the Seattle live draft for SFB. That first year we were doing live drafts, and Brandon Funston came to the draft. So Like it's all funny how it all comes together. So
Yes,
I
sir.
love Brandon Funston, great human being, and I love throwing back some of those memories. A lot of people didn't start back in our day when it comes to fantasy football, but I
That's
can
right.
remember that stuff very well, very well. So what was it that hooked you initially? What did you love about fantasy?
I mean, just another another way to, I can remember when I was a kid. This is before like computers and shit. In the early '80s, they used to have these little tiny plastic helmets. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember
Oh yeah.
little tiny plastic helmets. I
Yeah.
would collect them and organize them and be like, I don't know, man. I've just always been into it. So I mean, yeah, it didn't take much to hook me into fantasy football. I mean, just unbelievable. Yeah, so much fun.
So when it comes to playing the game, when it comes to playing in leagues, well, what is it that gets you riled up to play in a league? What makes a league special for you? What keeps you engaged in a fantasy league?
That's actually a good question. I Probably a bit of the camaraderie, the challenge, but I think it's probably just that's a good question. I mean, nowadays I play in so many leagues, almost too many. Once you start to get good at it, you say, well, maybe if I played in a few more, and of course, you can win a little bit more. And it's hard to scale it unless you play for a lot of money, but you can't just have one league for a lot of money and 10 leagues for very little money, because then the 10 leagues cease to matter. So you kind of have to ramp up, and so here I am with 20 some odd leagues. I'm not as crazy as some with 50, etc. But yeah, I think I have to be very, very choosy, as I'm sure you understand. A lot of people hit you up, hey, you want to be in this league? Hey, you want to be in this league? And it's like, dude, I only have so much bandwidth. It's not that I don't want to be in a league with you or whomever is asking. It's that I got to really be choosy. So at
Yeah.
this particular point, I'm super, super choosy. And it's hard to say no, but I force myself to do so, because if it was up to me, I'd be in hundreds of leagues, but I don't have time for that.
Do you have one league that is like your main league that you can think of?
I think so. I think everybody's got that league. I think the first league that I would mention is my family league, which is the one that dates back to 1999, which
Okay.
it's not the greatest league of all time. It's just the oldest league. And, I play
Yeah.
with my dad. He's 82 and he whooped my ass this week. He can't figure out the computer. So he picked Brandon Ayuk in the first round over Justin Jefferson by accident. And it's on Yahoo, of course, because we can never change it because they can't figure any of that. It's this whole thing, right?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm in these expert leagues with, there's my dad kicking my ass this week with, so those leagues are always fun. And everybody at home is going, yeah, the home league is a special kind of thing. But but I'd say one of my favorite leagues is the Dynasty Game Theory Invitational. It's not for a ton of money, but when I first started to make my way into the space, I thought I'd love to just kind of get as many amazing players in one league as I possibly can, as many as I can,
Yeah.
because I'm sort of new. Not everybody knows me, but like it's just murderers row. I mean, Justin Boone and JJ Zacharyson, Scott Connor, like you just name Hayden Winks is in that league now. I mean, it's just like an interesting league of like just people who are so into it. I mean, it's so much fun. So yeah, that type of stuff is really neat. I love leagues like that. Of course, I won it last year, so maybe that's why I like it too.
No, that sounds fun. It's good to win in the league when you got that kind of competition. When it comes to all the leagues you play in, is there one person that you would say is like your biggest rival, the person you gotta beat every time?
For sure. Yeah. It's like, the dude who's my homie who my friend, right? I mean, everybody's got a friend that,
Yeah.
you talk shit with, that when you're on Instagram, you send them all the stupid reels and you're just like, there's a lot of like, there's the old thing, like when girls hang out together, they all tell them, oh, you look beautiful. That dress looks so stunning on you. Those type of things. When guys get together, they just basically belittle each other. Right.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
there's the one guy that you belittle the absolute most, that you just, spar with every time. Well, yeah, that's my homie Chris. So screw
I
him.
love it.
He sucks.
Everybody's got a Chris. I love
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
So when was it that you discovered the fantasy community?
That's a cool question. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like I I got into Dynasty, thought it was the greatest thing ever, but there was, when I started to get into Dynasty, there wasn't as much Dynasty content in the world. And so I was like, well, let me find it. So I think one of the first things I searched, it was like Dynasty League Football, DLF or whatever. They were all behind a paywall, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't even know if that's worth it. What the hell, So I said, well, then I heard Twitter, like someone, so I was like, I literally created the account for Twitter to not to create content, but to learn about fantasy football, dynasty football, just to kind of like see if there's anybody talking about it. And so I was like just quietly in there. And then all of a sudden, I start to communicate with people, and I'm not even thinking at all that I've got anything to offer. But of course, in Twitter, you sort of have those interactions, and you can have interactions with anybody. I mean, the president or something could interact with you if he wanted to, right? So it's like all of a sudden I've had a few cool interactions with some people that I never dreamed of getting to interact with, and some of them thought I had something to offer. So that's where I said, well, maybe I do, and it just kind of grows from there. It's really incredible, actually, because I had no intention.
So when was it that you started creating content?
Well, let's see, boy, 2018 or 19 or something like that, I guess. 18 something. I had. There was it's yards per. I don't know if you've heard of yards per, but anyway, that was creator rank back in the day, and I thought the guy who runs that is a good guy. I say kid, I mean he's younger than me, but I thought I'd just help him out, and then I started to do rankings and things like that, and that's when Chalk sort of hit me up about the Undroppables, and then I was like, okay, let's fucking go. You know what I mean? It was like, so let's go and do it, and so Chalk and I have been sort of attached at the hip throughout this thing, and I couldn't ask for better partners than Chalk and Tommy. So,
what was it that made you just connect with those guys? Like, what was it that made you feel like this is a home? This is a good place to be?
Well, with Chalk, we were sort of both doing the same thing. If he were to describe his experience on Twitter, it would have been very much like mine, like sort of these interactions, and we'd find each other in the same streets, saying the same things, having the same opinion on the same thing, the same process, whatever, the sort of same tendencies. And we'd always just, Spider-Man meme each other because like, hey, dude, look at me. I'm here to say what you're saying, So we agreed with each other so much. We became sort of, internet friends. Right. And then when he started, he basically is the founder of the Undroppables. When he started it, I love the vision. The whole idea of, creating a platform, a cooperative, for instance, there's a lot of people who are, when I say creating content, there's people doing artwork and graphic arts and sound editing and different things that, hey man, I've never really done this, but I'd love to try. And then, maybe they're, using what they learned to go get a job doing that or whatever. Right. I mean, literally whatever the case may be, maybe they just wanted to give it a shot. Maybe they tried it and they failed and they're gone or whatever. So we just have those opportunities for people. And that vision was pretty cool. I thought that's really neat to have this sort of collaborative, space, as opposed to, we're just going to try and make money and that's it. It was a passion collaborative. That's for me. That was what got me.
Nice. So what's been the most rewarding part about this experience in the fantasy community for you?
Well, the most humbling is the success you have, right? I mean, anytime you have someone say that, your show, this, the show I do, The Undrafted, means something to them is actually kind of crazy. I never knew what it could be. So, that part is, that's pretty cool. But I think in a lot of ways, it's the relationships you make and pulling on the rope together with people and then all of a sudden, you realize actually, and I think you're going to ask me about the expo, the first year I went this year, to see people in person, but, it only, furthers the idea that people are very, very nice in this space. It really is. There's a lot of great people, and that part is cool. So the community is a bit better than sometimes it gets credit for, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's incredible people, and you've experienced that obviously with the expo. What was that like for you? We can definitely talk about that right now. What was that like going and meeting people in person for the first time? How was that for you?
It was surreal for me in a lot of ways. I was overwhelmed in so many ways, just being there and just. It's not like I was starstruck. I was just. It's like when worlds collide. It's like if your parents met your high school friends and your work friends all in one place. You're like, oh my God, this is weird. You know what I mean? What do I do? Who do I say hi to or whatever? I don't know. It's just, you know what I'm saying? It's like one of those moments. And so, I don't know. Yeah, I was overwhelmed by that part of it. And just having, as many conversations as I could, but not nearly enough, in my opinion. So I look forward to going back so that I can understand, now I know how it rolls. I can go in and actually probably participate a little bit better.
Sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, now, obviously, along this way, along this journey, creating content and getting connected with people in the community, can you name some of the people that have had a huge impact on you? Obviously, you've mentioned Chalk, you mentioned Tommy.
Yeah. Well, I think, you watch, to me, it's like you watch people do something and, like I go back to the show I just did today, which is the first time I was on Sonic Truth. I've been on Mind a Mansion with Matt Kelly before and other shows, but if I go back to the Sonic Truth when it was Matt Kelly and Nate Liss, I thought that was arguably the best show that I had heard. I mean, it was just so good. It was so entertaining. There was a lot of good information, but the way those two sort of bantered and bickered and, had the backs and forths was just an incredible show. I can remember being inspired by that show. There's a million other shows. I mean, I was listening to before that, even, Matthew Berry's show and things like that, like more mainstream shows. But that show sort of inspired me to be like, wow, that's kind of what's possible in a different sort of way. That's cool. And then honestly, there was a lot of bad shows. I mean, I'm sure you've heard, because I was like so eager to listen to so many podcasts. So I'd put them on. I'd be like, oh, this is rough. This is actually hard to no, really, right? It's like, and no shade. It's just, it is what it is, man. Maybe some people like that. It's all good, all love. But for me, I was like, this is brutal. And I thought, well, I'm pretty sure I can be better than that. I'm pretty sure I can do a better job than that. Let's see how close I can get to some of the things that I think are amazing. And so, obviously people like, now you see, like for me, JJ and the show he does, especially the short shows.
Yeah.
Just very incredible. I mean, he does it takes him longer than the 15 minutes that show is. It's a edited show. He does an amazing job. Obviously, he prepares heavily for it. It's incredible. But that's a really cool, condensed bit of information, an amazing podcast. So, all those types of things, as you watch people do an amazing job, you're like, how close can I get to being that good or better? And that's inspiring.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, some great people you mentioned there for sure. But let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about Dynasty Fantasy Football. Let's talk about fundamentals. First off, for people that are never played Dynasty, what's the reason for someone to start get into a Dynasty league or start one of their own?
It's very easy. This is it. If you play Madden and you play it on franchise mode, you should be playing Dynasty.
That's a good answer.
That's it, right? Because do you appreciate picks and future and, going for it? And, oh my God, if I could trade for that guy, I could use whatever the case is, right? I don't need, linebackers. I need corners or whatever. All that stuff is so much fun. It's the whole idea of managing a team and you're responsible for everything. And, every decision you make, good or bad, if you pick Trey Lance, you got to live with it. If you pick Zach Wilson, you got to live with it. You got to deal with it. You got to come out of that. If you end up picking Malik Neighbors or Justin Jefferson, you hit the jackpot, right? So all these sort of, things that go into it, you get to keep a player for his whole career. You get to strategize 365 days a year. You can pick up your dynasty team and make a decision on a daily basis year round. It is so much fun. So for me, if that doesn't sound like fun, then we're on different levels, man, because that sounds amazing to me. And that's what drew me to Dynasty, is that sort of Madden franchise mode, but for real money with fantasy football. It's amazing.
That sums it up pretty good. What are the key differences, though, when it comes to redrafts and dynasty strategies, and how should managers adjust their approach?
I mean, in a lot of ways, it's a completely different game. Bad decisions are magnified, as I just pointed out. It's like, I'll have redraft teams where I'm like, I'll make a bad pick. Well, you know what? You just literally drop them. Doesn't matter. Who gives? I'm just done. Pick up a waiver wire. Guy gets hurt. Get rid of it. Just move on. Whereas in Dynasty, those decisions are now magnified, and there's got to be a deeper strategy as to how you're going to cope with that, or deal with that, or respond to that. Whereas in redraft, it's very arcade mode. Just, oh, guy's hurt. Fuck it. Let's just drop it, move on. So, I think it's a hugely different game. Look, redraft is way more approachable. I mean, you can't have a casual dynasty league, really. I don't think that exists. It's a game for those who are into this. And, if you're not that into it, then probably not for you. I mean, unless maybe there's a casual dynasty league. I mean, Sure, there's a few of them, but yeah, for the most part, it's not as much fun because if it's casual, like I don't know if you play in Dynasty leagues, you go to the send a trade offer and nobody responds for weeks. It's like, well, that's not fun,
Yeah, you definitely have to have engagement in a
Yeah.
dynasty league. Otherwise, it's just gonna, it's just gonna waste away, and you lose interest. That's a problem. Obviously, in
Totally.
dynasty leagues, that's the main concern. From my perspective, it's always that. Gosh, if there's a few people that aren't, just letting their teams go, like there's gonna be a problem in a few years when they leave the league, and no one wants to assume that roster, right?
Yes.
So when it comes to like settings for you in dynasty, are there certain things that you prefer?
I have this answer like down. Like this is, for me, I love a 12 team, start 12, super flex, slight tight end premium, half PPR, half point per first down, no kickers or Ds, no trade deadline, pay a year in advance, league safe only for the money. Like these are like the ways I play, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, can you play something different or off that? Sure. I mean, I play in PPR leagues, I play in one quarterback leagues, I play in 10 leagues, 14 team leagues. I play in a lot of different leagues, right? But if you ask me what's my preferred, it's very simple. 12 by 12, super flex, slight tight end premium, half PPR, half point per first down. Absolutely that's the way to play.
Love it, love it. Now, you mentioned trade deadlines. There's definitely opinions on that. Why is it for you no trade deadline?
So this takes into consideration that if there's not a strong, commissioner or strong understanding of the managers in the league, where collusion could be a little bit funny, you might as well have some sort of a trade deadline, maybe a week before the playoffs or something like that. But look, I'm of the opinion that both the rebuilders and especially the rebuilders, but also the guys going for it, all these guys, all these managers benefit from having no trade deadline. If you're going into the championship week and CJ Stroud, it gets a high ankle sprain and you only had two quarterbacks, but you were in the, it's like, wait, I'm just going to lose now. I can't go trade for Aaron Rodgers. Like, and then some people will argue against that, say, yeah, you shouldn't be able to just go trade for Aaron Rodgers. Like, well, why not? And I would flip it the other way. If I'm a rebuilding team and I've been trying to get off Aaron Rodgers all year, and then all of a sudden the gods sprain CJ Stroud's ankle on a guy going to the championship game, and I've got him, and I can get a future second or something, even though he's retiring. Let's say this is a swan song. Still, I'd pay the second to be able to play him. So it's like as a rebuilder, I get to take advantage of desperate, contenders. And I think I would argue a no trade deadline helps rebuilding teams even more than it helps contenders, because contenders will be compelled to pay even when they probably shouldn't be making those deals. So I think it helps a healthier league.
Yeah, that's a great argument for sure. And there's nothing like that thrill of moving someone off your roster that you did not think there was any value, right?
Right, no hope. The worst, of course, is you're the guy on the other side who is playing this guy, and all of a sudden he's like, dude, did he just trade for Tyreek Hill? What the so
Yeah.
There's all those moments. But you know what? Hey, if the rules are the rules, you could have traded for Tyreek Hill too. He's available. Go get him. Go make it. Go make a deal. I know some people will have a problem with that, but I also allow for splitting of the pot in championship week. But so in other words, if they want to make a deal on the money, if it's $1,000 payout and they're like, hey, let's just chop it and play for bragging rights, that's their call.
Okay. It's fair. In general, when it comes to general strategy for like a startup dynasty draft, how do you approach a startup?
Well, I think the first thing you got to look at, which you assume people would do this, but you really want to look at the settings, right? What are the rules? What are the, start 12 by 12. I know that my good friends over at Destination Dynasty, Destination Devi, Ray G, and Scott Connor. Scott Connor talks, they have that show, Dynasty Trades in 5, which is a great show. I'm sure most people are interested in that show, but they'll just talk about, trades and what they would do and how they would manage certain teams. And one of the first things that are basically a prerequisite for them to explain what's going on in the team is how many teams, how many starting roster spots, because without that, the trade analysis doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So you have to know what the settings are, how many teams, how many starting roster spots, because that gives you a number. Look, a 10-team league with 10 roster spots or 8 roster spots, let's say a shallow league, 10 by 8, that's 80 starting spots. A 12-team league with 12 starters is 144. That's a big difference. So players 80 through 144 now become starters, whereas in the other league, they're not starters. So I know that sounds kind of basic, but that gives you your thresholds for where you're looking to sort of target starters versus bench players. And then you look at, it sounds kind of advanced, but it's not really. You kind of look at where those those values sort of fall. So, what type of players can I get that aren't even starters? Well, that in a shallower league, I want to get more. I want to trade up. In a deeper league, I kind of want to play into depth. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
all those things. What are the scoring settings? Is it a super tight end premium? All these things: 6-point passing touchdown, 4-point PPR, non PPR. Is it weighted PPR? All these things I need to think about. And then I need to think about how I can exploit the scoring settings to my advantage. Where can I gain small edges, as I create this team so that I can have a little bit of an advantage over the field? It doesn't mean I'm going to win. It just means that I have edges. And that's really what Dynasty is, quite frankly, is extracting small edges over and over and over and over and over again until you have a dynasty. You have a team that's way better than everybody else, not because you're, Mr. Smarty Pants and I know Justin Jefferson's better than CD Lamb or whatever. I mean, player takes help, but just extracting those edges, slice by slice over the course of time, all of a sudden you've accrued a lot of value where your team is just better than the field.
Some great points there. Do you ever see teams that start out a startup draft as like we're rebuilding from the beginning, just going all youth, and trying to, project forward 3 or 4 years where they want to compete? Do you ever see teams find success that way, or do you always recommend, getting in there, getting a good balance?
In general, I say that you basically want to take players in general that are going to be worth more in the future than they are right now, right?
Okay.
So there's a general dynasty curve that I've called it over the years, which basically is, player starts off, one way and then kind of finishes his career on the downslope, right? I mean, generally speaking. So you can kind of look at that. They've called it the age apex. Where does that, all that sort of thing. That's part of it, but it's not all of it. I mean, we could look at, like, for example, if you did a startup this off season, Tank Dell would have been a young on the rise player, yet his value has gone down thus far to start the first 3 weeks of the season. Whereas a player like Chris Godwin, he's over the age apex, he's down the curve, but his value has gone up. So, not to say that you can see all that stuff coming, but you do want to take a look at ADP and make sure that you're taking players in the ADP range that have the best shot of accruing value. Obviously, at the 101, no such thing. Can't get any more valuable than that. So, but you get my drift. Then at that point, you want a player that's very, very rock solid to hold his value, and so forth. So in general, that's the idea. Now, in general, you're gonna look for players at the front side of that dynasty curve where, hey, they're just about to explode. So yeah, rookies, year 1, year 2 players are the best players to target for sure. And I generally build around young wide receivers. But that strategy certainly is something that has become very popular. So sometimes you have to zig while everybody else is zagging. But in general, that's the idea.
Sure. Now, what signals tell you when it's time to rebuild?
I mean, I think the simple question is, can this team win it all? Right? I mean, you look at it, it's like, if your team can win it all, and self-scouting is something that, I think even in professional sports, I think teams do an awful job of self-scouting. I think it was, Bill Belichick and, Michael Lombardi talks about how they self-scouted themselves all the time. If we were playing us, how would I beat us? Right. What are our weaknesses? Well, those are smart, front office and head coaches that can self-scout. And I think you got to self-scout yourself. If you're in a 12-team league, you really have an 8% chance to win your league. Right. But that's not good enough. So, you got to scout the league as well. What other teams don't have a chance to win your league? If you're one of them, then you got to start rebuilding right away. When you're rebuilding, there's one place that you can store value that never goes down. And that's in draft capital. So, it also doesn't allow you to score points. I always say you can't play your 2025 first round pick in your flex, right? You can't do it. You got to play some other rubber there. So, when you're trading your current players for future draft picks, they just can't lose value as draft picks. Draft picks are only going to increase in value as they get closer and closer to the draft. So that's the best way to rebuild, is to get off as many players as you can. Take the opportunity. I just sold, in a rebuild, I just sold Carson Steele. I just sold Jordan Mason. And I've got those players in other leagues where I'm starting them, but if I'm a rebuilder, what do I want Carson Steele for? He's not this is it. This is his spike of value. Maybe he's going to perform well and maybe he'll go up a little bit, but I need to get off him before he fails. Cause if he fails, he's done again. Nobody wants him. So, that's kind of the idea. If I have a 25 or 26 second round pick for Carson Steele, good enough.
No, I love that. And that's great. How about a general approach when it comes to rookie drafts? How do you value draft picks in a dynasty league? I know you just kind of mentioned it's kind of gold, right?
Yeah. Yeah. What about you? Do you like trading future first for players?
I like picks. I mean, I'm always accumulating picks. I think I'm in 4 dynasty leagues. I have so many picks. This last year, I can't even tell you how many. This one league, I had a bunch of old players, won the championship, and was able to essentially accumulate, I guess, I don't know, 4 or 5 first round picks. I had, a ton of seconds and thirds, and just redid the whole roster. I think that's also part of the thrill. I think a lot of people, when you talk about, why people love dynasty, the whole Madden effect, it's also people that love the NFL draft too, right?
Yes.
There's that thrill of draft season. I grew up, when the draft once upon a time was just on the weekends, and that weekend, that was my favorite weekend of the year outside of maybe like Christmas. It was draft. So that's always been a big thing for me. So I'm unfortunately a little biased when it comes to just that passion for accumulating picks. It's affected me negatively sometimes in dynasty, but for the most part, I'm always trying to accumulate picks, because like you said, it's that value stays, and you can always punt those picks, to the next year. But at some point, you want to cash in. The draft picks are what's going to get you the most when it comes to cashing in for the time. Like when you're ready to compete, those picks can get you a lot of talent in the moment if you need to, if you want to compete now, right?
I agree. My future firsts are basically untouchable. Like they're basically untouchable. I want to accumulate first because, if you're going to spend firsts, I'm only spending them on super elite players, like, elite quarterbacks and elite, wide receivers. That's basically it. Other than that, I'm going to take shots in the draft with those picks. But I'm not going to just sort of trade one first round pick for a guy, seldom will I do that, and if you look back at the moments when you did do that, you probably aren't exactly happy you did. It didn't change your fortune. So for me, I want as many first round picks and as many picks as I can. I want the Iron Bank to be strong. Especially when I'm winning. So a lot of people think, oh, I want to build it when I'm rebuilding. How about, especially like you just said, you had a team that won and then you turn around and you've got all the picks. It's like, people hate that. Your league mates are like, dude, what the hell? I'm in a couple leagues where I've dominated, and it's from Breaking Bad where how can you let him keep doing this? They put that meme on there every time I make a trade when I get a pick, because they're like, dude, stop it. You're allowing him to just dominate us, and I'm in leagues where I've seen trades like that. I just saw a league where they traded James Conner and got Sam Darnold. And I was like, dude, That is in a super flex league, of course, the Sam Darnold guy. And the Sam Darnold guy is the returning champ. His team is the most dominant, and you can't give him, Sam Darnold when he loses a quarterback. He lost like two, I don't remember who, someone, doesn't matter. But he's like, he could use a quarterback, and that's all he's got, like Jefferson and Lamb and da-da-da, and you're like, dude, Connor was irrelevant to him. You can't, so there's game theory to all this where you look and go, I'm not letting you foist James Conner on me and get a starting quarterback who could have upside going forward. He's now a top 20, 25 quarterback, in Dynasty. Absolute malpractice. It's okay. I mean, I'm not calling anybody out specifically. Their name's not out there, but it's just a bad process play. And it's all because you're not necessarily paying attention to everybody's motivation in the league, which is something that you really want to pay attention to. Hey, why does this guy want X, Y, or Z player for me? What's he really trying to do? And make sure you're not, making a trade against your best interest, even if you think it was, well, I need a running back. That's not how you do this, So anyway.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful stuff. I love everything you're saying. I mean, there's so much to game theory and dynasty fantasy football. So good moment to plug the show again. Obviously I would say that we could talk about this for hours, but it's more hours. It's endless hours. And that's what the Undrafted is all about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I love, having conversations with other, analysts who sort of see it this way, because then we can kind of get into the weeds, whether it be with Chalk or, again, I do a ton of shows with Scott Connor. People love those shows because his brain is sort of set in a certain way, and mine is too, but we're both, dynasty game theory players. That's how we look at it. It's, there's player evaluation, but it's really about making sure that your strategy is sound. I think, well, you're going to ask me some more questions, so I'll let you go ahead because you're going to lead me right into it. I'll go ahead.
Let's go then. How do you assess risk when it comes to building a roster?
I think if you have a full iron bank and you keep it full, then it sort of forces you to measure risk better. So if you're making a move that's going to deplete your future draft capital, then you may be taking on more risk than you should be, in my opinion, because I think your draft capital is there to protect you in the future. It's basically saying, here's the lifeline. So if you have multiple picks in each round, 2 first, 2 second, 2 third, 2 fourth, right? You have twice as many picks as the average player. That's kind of a lot. That's a lot more. It doesn't feel like a lot more, but it really is a lot more. And, you don't necessarily have to have, like, I've seen people and it's cool. They have basically like all but 2 picks in the first, all but 3 picks in the second. You can rebuild that way. It's definitely not something that you can't do it. You can do it. You're going to get a whole class. You're probably going to get some good players. You're going to miss some, but but even just having 1 or 2, 2 or 3 sort of picks in each round in future drafts, it allows you to have a little bit more of a cushion to now accept risk. So if I'm already leveraged out, or if this deal leverages out my future iron bank, then I'm pushing risk too far for me. I know some people like to play the game where they basically, and this makes sense, but I'll tell you why it doesn't make sense. Here's the strategy, is that all of my future picks and my players are the value I can work with. I might as well dip all the way into my future reserves, my future picks, put those players on my team so that my team has a much higher chance of winning than other teams, because I've leveraged all the value into my roster. It's true. You do actually do that. However, now, as you point out, if Christian McCaffrey's broken and, Justin Herbert hurts his foot, right? If Puka Nacua, Cooper Cup, I don't know what your team looks like. It could be the absolute worst case scenario. You have no way to recoup. Nobody's going to bail you out. You're going to have to work really, really hard to put the value back into the future, because your team has just lost so much of its value standing there on its feet. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you ever enter a draft where, like, I have too many draft picks, I need to trade some of these picks to get future picks? Or do you ever usually just like, let's go, I got so many picks, this is my draft?
No, I love to, think about when you're on the clock. If you're in a dynasty league and you've been on the clock in rookie drafts, for instance, even the 3.03, the Kamani Vidal pick this year. Look,
Yeah.
I'm a huge Kamani Vidal fan. And in so many, and people know that because I'm known. So people will be like, "Oh, you love Kamani." Here, I'd be on the clock with Kamani pick, and people are like, "Oh, I know who this is." They'd be texting the group chat. I'll give you one guess. That type of thing, and then I'd trade the pick away. And people are like, "Wait, what? I thought you liked him." I'm like, "Yeah, but this is a high leverage opportunity for me to trade the pick." Oftentimes, I'd get a future second and another pick later in that draft. I'd take the 303, trade it for the 311 and a 25 second.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, can you trade Kamani Vidal for a second and a third right now? No. And so making that trade on the clock,
Yeah.
I got a player. Maybe I got Ray Davis later or something. I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
I got somebody, right? Whomever, Eric All or something. I don't know. A player. Plus, I also have a future second. That's a trade I'm willing to make every time because now I've restocked my future, taken a pick. I have a player. So yeah, I'm always looking to make trades on the clock. Now, that I'm not looking to do that when I'm at the last pick of a high leverage tier, maybe the top 8 this past year where, you're looking at Adunze and Bowers or something. Someone's gonna have to pay, for those picks, right? I'm right there. It's like, dude, you want this pick. It's going to cost you because this is a real high leverage play here. So, you don't just do it blindly. Oh, I just traded back, because I think one of your questions, and maybe I'm stepping on a little bit, is do you trade back in rookie drafts? It's like, well, you really have to kind of, and you don't always know, because if I knew all the outcomes of all the players, it's over. But we think we kind of know. We have this sort of idea of where these tiers are. So you tier it out. You think and you try and make, like, I can't tell you how many times if Bowers was falling, I traded up to get him, because it's like, wait, what are you guys doing? Like if he was at 6, 7, 8, in a super flex there, and I'd be like, ooh, they let him get that far, let me go in and swoop him, and if I could move up a bit, I moved up for Jonathan Brooks a couple times late in the first, the 112, I'd moved from 2-2 to 111 or something. It's a small little move up. So that may turn out to be a quote unquote bad move. Maybe Jonathan Brooks ends up sucking, right? There's no knowing, but my best, intuition said Brooks is going to be a starting running back and I can move up a little bit and get him. I'm going to go do that.
Yeah. And obviously the more draft picks you have, the more draft capital you have, the more you can make those moves to strategically get yourself where you want to be. And like when you mentioned kind of trading back on Vidal, the cool thing is it's Dynasty. Like that player is still available for you at a cost right. if he's not on your roster. So go get him some other way. And like you said, is he available for a third and a second right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can buy him for that. Yeah, you can't sell him for that, right?
Yeah, I love it. So don't get swept up in the excitement of the moment in the draft, right? Without realizing, okay, well, I can make some moves to put myself in a better position to gain capital and compete in the future. How about positional scarcity? How does that shape your roster management and draft and trade strategies?
Yeah, it's been something that I mentioned Scott Connor. He definitely helped me see this light. Him and Jordan McNamara both. There's a certain amount of running back. Running back's a funny position because you do want an elite running back if you can get it, but past that, the running backs they get hurt a lot, they get replaced, they age out quickly. That's the whole idea of running back fragility. Well, because of that, you don't want to be heavily invested capital-wise in running back because here today, gone tomorrow. If you go back to whenever Dalvin Cook was a first round pick, first or second round pick in a dynasty startup, one quarterback league, whatever, he was the sort of the guy. Mike Evans was probably a third round pick or something. Mm-hmm. Mike Evans is still going. It was like so the wide receivers tend to hang on a whole lot longer, and if they're good, they're gonna be more stable. So you kind of look at these things. It's not only just value over replacement, but it's also what these players tend to do. Just the prototype, not necessarily the player. Like, well, Josh Allen's awesome. He's going to be, he's going to play till he's 40. It's just, what does that prototype look like generally? What do they, what sort of careers do they tend to have? I want to invest, at the top in players that are more likely to have longer, runways of success. And then I kind of want to stop drafting wide receivers at a certain point, at a certain threshold. In a league, you basically count the amount of potential starting wide receivers you could have. In other words, if it's start 3 wide receiver, 3 flex, that's 6. Well, you don't want to have a ton more than 6 or 7 wide receivers on your team. I mean, you certainly could, if it's a deep roster, you can have maybe up to 10 or whatever. But if you just have 15, 16 wide receivers, you're doing it wrong, because you're never going to play any of those guys. If you've got a bunch of good wide receivers up top, you're just, you're set them and forget them. And generally speaking, the guys that you're drafting down the line, they're nobodies. However, a running back that late, also probably nobody. But if he becomes somebody, he's Carson Steele, he's Jordan Mason. They're in the lineup and they're scoring you high-end fantasy points. So you want to load your roster with all these sort of, backup running backs, and you want to be overweight with running backs in those values, right?
Sure.
The freebies, I'd rather have Tyler Beatty, now than, I don't know, some wide receiver that I'm never going to play. They're both probably zeros, but somehow or another, all of a sudden these guys can elevate. The running backs can elevate. A bad wide receiver will never elevate. A bad running back can. And so it's understanding these sort of things as you put together a roster, especially when they're deep. Obviously, if it's super shallow, if you're playing in a 20 man, 20 total roster spot Dynasty League, changes yet again, but in general, I want to invest heavily in that elite quarterback and elite wide receiver and go from there.
Nice. Now, in like a long-term league, how do you approach win now versus future potential? Like, is there a time where you do sacrifice the future just to get that championship?
Every time I've done that, I've failed. And I generally feel like if you're making a win now move, it probably won't be the reason you win now. Your team was probably already either, ready to win or it wasn't. So if you're sacrificing, so to speak, future to win now, I think it's a bad move. I think it's a bad move. Almost every time I've ever done that, it's been bad. So, if you want to operate around the edges, buying using seconds and thirds, potentially, especially again, we just talked about it, you have multiples, right? You try to keep your team where you've got 2, 3, 4 seconds, 2, 3, 4 thirds. Well, you can throw maybe a second and a third at someone and get an Amari Cooper type, a Tyler Lockett type, a Terry McLaurin type for a stretch run if you felt like you need it. But again, I would argue, is that really going to be the difference? I mean, you go out and get, I remember one year, this was the year they both got hurt, whatever year this was, 2 years ago, whatever. I made trades for Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey. They were the best 2 players in the league easily, first 3 or 4 weeks, whatever it was. I'm like, I'm going all in. I'm going to win this fucking league, baby. And I traded all my first round capital. They immediately both got hurt, missed the rest of the season, like whatever it was just awful, so you can make these mistakes when they don't seem like mistakes. They seem, everybody was like, this is a great play. But again, your 2025 first round pick cannot blow out his ACL.
It's true, and it does seem like the fantasy gods are always against you when you try to make that move to patch a championship run together. It's funny.
Yeah. Now I'll say this. Listen, unless you're playing a game that's on the money, right? So in other words, that's why no trade deadline. So if I'm making, I always say I would trade my 2025 first for air if you told me I would just win the chip because I did it, right?
Yeah.
In other words, I'll do it. It's not that I don't want to spend my money. It's that I don't want to waste my money. Why spend the money if it doesn't have any impact? So I'll trade it for nothing if you just tell me by doing this you'll win the title. Great. So, but if I'm on the money, it's like, if I win this week, I make money. If I lose this week, I don't make money. You can look at maybe buying a DFS play, right? It's like a weekly play. You're like, dude, he's set up to smash. I can get Joe Mixon for 2 seconds. Screw it. Let's go. I'm going to put him in. He's going to play flex. We're going to have an opportunity to win. That's totally different. But, at week 3 where we are now, going quote unquote all in, there's no such thing. You can't do it. Don't do it.
How much time do you think about like an Arch Manning? Like, okay, how do I position myself to be in the realm of possibilities of potentially acquiring someone like that on your roster?
I don't know. I mean, probably only 1 year out.
Okay.
If there's a truly generational player, maybe, but in a lot of these instances, even that, when was the last purely generational player that absolutely, did it? I mean, Bijan was that guy. Saquon was that guy.
Yeah.
Caleb's
Yeah.
that guy. Trevor Lawrence was that guy. Like, you look at whoever those guys were, and a lot of times it's like, dude, yeah, they're great, but they didn't, I don't know, Justin Jefferson wasn't that guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't. So he came from nowhere. CeeDee Lamb kind of was, but kind of wasn't that guy, right?
Yeah.
So you look at the guys that end up being the ones, it's not always that guy. So, I think just taking, pragmatic steps to getting as many shots at the apple is the way to go.
It's true. Yeah, you'd rather have multiple picks where you can, a couple players are going to come through and pop, as opposed to putting it all in one player. I know there's just so much hype and excitement for stuff like that. I was curious to ask that question. So, but when it comes to player evaluation and a little bit more on trade strategy, what metrics or stats are most important to you when projecting long-term value in the Dynasty League?
I'm not sure I have a great answer for this, especially when we talk about, projecting long-term player value in Dynasty. But I would say if if I were starting someplace, it would be probably target earning. I think most of us play in PPR leagues. I mentioned I like half PPR, half per point for first down. Excuse me. But target earning still, even in standard leagues, it's been shown that a target is worth more than a rushing attempt. Players who get targeted at a high level are going to score you fantasy points. That's a good place to start. Can this guy earn targets? A lot of times when I'm drafting a startup, I'm like, if you told me nothing, they're not their names, nothing. But if I just had target earning stats, like career targets last year, target share, college target per route run, like just tell me how often these guys are getting targeted. And I think that's probably the metric I'd start with.
Nice. How about when it comes to trades? How do you attack the leagues you're in when it comes to just targeting trade partners and looking for market inefficiencies and other managers' tendencies?
Yeah, what's the old saying when you're at a poker table? If you want to try and find the fish, right? Well, if you can't spot the fish, you're the fish, right?
That's good. That's good.
So be careful if you can't find the mark. But I think you certainly. I mean, look, if there's a weak dynasty player in your league, they should be your best friend, right? Don't try and coach them. Don't try and make them any better. Just give them a lot of encouragement. Let them know you're their buddy.
That's good. That's good for sure. What mistakes do you see that managers make often in dynasty leagues, and how can they avoid them?
Well, I think I just said it too, like coaching other players, right? Guy sends you a bad trade offer, and you're like, dude, go to keep trade cut. This isn't even close. Look at this. The guy's like, oh, keep trade cut. Never heard of this. What? You're enlightening this guy who's a moron in your league for no reason. Like, what are you doing? If there's a guy in there who thought this was, I always say this: if someone sends you a bad trade offer, only one of two things is true. Either they're an idiot or they think you're an idiot. Yes?
Yeah, it's fair.
And if that's the case, I can exploit either one of those two angles. I can exploit that. So I'm not looking to educate him or let him know that I'm educated. I'm not looking to do any of that. I'm looking to communicate until he makes his dumb decision to send me something that's, I think he's probably the idiot. You know what I mean? And if he just thinks I'm an idiot, well, that doesn't even really matter that much. But he's going to make a mistake, and I want to be there to snap it.
How about when it comes to like evaluating a player based on their team's offensive system, their coaching stability, or long-term direction? How much do you take that into account when it comes to valuing players?
Well, I think if you think about it, right? Not very much. What about Malik Neighbors and Brock Bowers, right? Coming out of the draft. Oh, the Giants suck.
Yeah.
Oh, the Raiders, they got Michael Mayer. Their offense sucks. No quarterback. Archaic coach, just going to run the ball. You name it. There was all sorts of bad stuff about those two landing spots. And what do those two players do? Clearly the one at their positions down. I mean, they're just unbelievable studs. Why? Because they're great. So good players will overcome their situations.
It's good. It's good. Now, how about during the season? What point in the season do you start thinking, oh, okay, I'm looking more at a rebuild here as opposed to like, okay, I gotta saddle up and get ready for this playoff run?
I think you know right away, don't you? I mean, unless it's an injury situation. Like I've got a couple teams, whether it's Puka and T. Higgins and you name it. There's just Pacheco's and all of a sudden you start to deal with these injuries. Hawkinson, Addison. I can't remember all of it. I have one team with just a lot of these dudes all in one. And it's like, gosh, can I hold on here? Can I hold on? Or should I be, those are the tricky ones, where you've got injuries. You're not sure when they'll be back. You're not sure where you'll be when they get back. You're not sure if you're good enough, even if they do and when they come back. It's funny. I had a team that was kind of a win now team. And before the season, it was a fresh startup, man. It's crazy how it can happen. Kind of a win now team startup. And I've endured a lot of injuries to start. But on top of that, before the season, I got a Godfather offer for Chris Olave. So I sold him for, 2 firsts and a second or something like that. So I was like, all right, well, now that makes me weaker. Now these injuries make me weaker. Well, I've got a number of firsts, but not my own 2025 first. So I'm like, oh, this is a tough spot. I really want this team to win because I don't have my own first, but I also am kind of thrust into a rebuild given I sold one of my best players for picks and I got a bunch of injuries. So it's like, how do you play that? Well, I'm sort of straddling the line right now. I'm trying to stay at least good enough so that I can, maybe, who knows, maybe get a little lucky backdoor into the playoffs. Who knows, right? So you kind of straddle the line sometimes. Some teams just play themselves. You're like, dude, this team isn't going to win. I need to rebuild. Let's just make it happen. Other teams are just clearly awesome. The straddle ones are the ones that you want to just kind of be patient. I think that's always the best advice is don't go too far one way or the other. If it could go either way, just kind of let it play out. See what happens with, 2-3 weeks left. If you're still in striking distance, you can maybe win 2 or 3 in a row and make it into the playoffs. Once you're in the playoffs, you could win. So I wouldn't just give up on a good team and start selling it just because it's, not going to win this year, especially if it's injury riddled, right? So it's kind of all those things coming to.
Yeah, and sometimes you gotta, opportunities present that you might not anticipate.
True that.
It might be a strange point in the season to have to weigh those things. I just recently traded Breece Hall for Bucky Irving and 3 first-round picks.
Right.
This year, next year, and the following year. I'm like, I can't pass on that. I think, right? What do you think of that deal?
I think it's a great deal because you kind of get even some Bucky Irving doesn't replace Breece Hall, obviously, but you get some running back replacement production. If you're kind of, if your team is otherwise awesome, it's hard to give up on a player like that. It's hard, because you're like, dude, I'm winning. You're basically paying me to not win. So I've been there, but I think it's the right process move. It's funny because you could look back and be like, who are those 3 guys? It was like, it was Zach Wilson, Javonte Williams, and Mac Jones were the 3 first-round picks I got for him. So could be CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, and right, you just don't know. So obviously, in Josh Allen, it's like, oh yeah, that worked out. So the picks are unknown, but I think that look, the point of the matter is you could probably take one of those picks and buy back into a Joe Mixon or whatever, and now you've kind of replaced it. Plus, you got so there's different ways to play it where you can still totally come out on top.
And I got Braylon Allen on my taxi squad too. So like if things go wrong for Breece, I'm like in really good position with that deal. We'll see how that goes. But it is always fun to obviously you have there's so much evaluation that goes into the rookie process. When
Well,
it
the
comes
worst
to
is like that situation. If you're a good team, it's the worst when someone gives you a tremendous value slam dunk, but it doesn't fit your build. Where you're like, dude, I don't want to rebuild or I don't want to sell good players. I was trying to do, I was trying to win. But now you're basically telling me I got to do this. Oh my God, it's so brutal. But I mean, if you're a rebuilding team and someone offers you that, you're like, snap, great, perfect.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was at. So I'm excited about it. But that's, again, another reason why Dynasty is fun. We don't know the end result of a deal like that for 5 years, right? So
Right.
we'll see how it plays out. There's so many different things that can happen. It's fun. But obviously, like we've talked about before, the draft is fun. We got athletic profiles that come out on these players. How important are those profiles? We talked about Player Profiler as well, a great resource for that kind of thing. How important are those athletic profiles to you when it comes to college production and landing versus like landing spot and that kind of stuff?
Well, we certainly talked about landing spot not being, important at all almost. I mean, you got to stick to your evaluation. I mean, landing spot maybe can split the difference, but I think, you got to really be on specifically on a tie for that to split the difference, because if you think a guy's better, you got to lean into that. I've done one of the things that made me quote unquote famous. I don't think that I'm famous, but one of the things I'm known for is the anatomy. I do every year, and it's basically just a rudimentary look at what identifies elite players. And, we've sort of been doing a lot of work behind the scenes, ever since at the Undroppables. And this past year, we released our wide receiver model, and we're very, very proud of it. It's been very, very solid so far this year too. Identifying Jalen McMillan, identifying Luke McCaffrey, who've both been, surprises in a positive way. Fading Keon Coleman, fading a couple other players that, Leggett obviously, and Ricky Pearsall was a fade. Obviously we win that one by default. But that's no, seriously, that doesn't make us happy. We didn't think that Ricky Pearsall, based off the wide receiver model, was a good pick in Dynasty. But so, we're taking everything that we can to try and get better at player evaluation, because player evaluation is hard, because we get excited for certain players for certain reasons. We like a guy, he made a big play in a bowl game, or there's a lot of things that infect our mind. I remember I liked N'Keal Harry because that one-handed catch I saw him make. It wasn't the only thing, but I remember that one-handed catch. It's very vivid in my mind. I'm like, dude, this kid is fucking good.
Yeah.
No, he's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is we take this wide receiver model that we just came out with this past off season. We look back, and N'Keal Harry was not going to be drafted if we had paid attention to it, because of course we back tested it. So I think what I guess I'm getting at is you want to continuously never think you've got it figured out. Never think this is the end. I'm perfect. I'm the best at this. You want to try and be the best at it, but you want to consistently and constantly be trying to figure it out more and better. And to speak about, I think this is probably widely known, but athletic testing at the wide receiver position is as a matter of fact, it's not in our model. We don't have a single 40-time, 20-second split, shuttle, nothing, zero to do with size or speed, because it's really irrelevant. It's proven irrelevant. Some of the best receivers ran slow. So it's just not something that we're interested in measuring, because it didn't have it's all noise.
Yeah.
But at the running back position, it's a bit different. Size and speed does play. It's becoming a little bit different with split backfields and things like that, which we're also paying attention to. We're trying to develop the running back model, but very hard to do. So, you kind of go with the things that you think matter most. Draft capital if all else fails. But, we've gotten pretty good at that, and we're doing a real good job at the Undroppables. And this coming off season, we'll be even better at it, and can't wait to, get to the off season.
I love it. Well, speaking of off season, how do you attack an off season in Dynasty? What's the best way to improve your roster in the Dynasty off season?
You're going to ask a question about hype circles, right?
Yeah.
And
we'll get right into that. Yeah.
That's the next question, right? I don't mean to step on your questions, but it's a brilliant question, because that's the best way, is understanding that. The fact that you mention it in your show sheet, I was like, dude, that's it. That's the answer. Your next question answers this question. You know what I mean? And it's because if you think about the calendar as a circle, or however the hell you want to think about it, but you think about when those picks, as soon as the NFL draft happens, the moment the NFL draft happens, those picks go up in value. Because everybody's like, dude, did you see the Raiders drafted, but Cowboys got this? And dude, did you see where Kate Bubba? It's all there. And everybody's excited. But now everybody's excited to make a draft pick. I know who I want. I want this guy. I want that guy. I want that. Every league is the same. They might want different players. Nobody wants the same guy, but it doesn't matter. Your pick could be a boat, right? Your pick could be a boat. And so all those picks increase in value. Now, I'm not specifically saying to just sell your picks at that point, but certainly that's when, if you're going to sell the picks, I am always still a bit careful to sell them before the actual sort of my rookie draft happens, because I might think, you know what, pick 7 is really the end of a tier, let's just say. And then all of a sudden, 2 idiots in front of you pick two other guys that you would have never thought are way ahead of ADP. And now 2 guys have just slid to you that you didn't think you were going to get. And you sold pick 7 thinking it was, you see what I'm saying? You just never know. And so I'm usually hesitant to just sell on what I think will happen. I'd rather just wait to see what happens. But yeah, if you're going to sell picks, now that's the time to do it. Guys will give you almost anything for that chance to select their favorite player.
Yeah, that's great. Great point for sure. And that's, same thing when it comes to just, coach speak and all that kind of stuff. You can play the offseason in a way where you're, you have certain players on your roster and there's a lot of hype around them that, you got to pay attention to value essentially. When that value, ticks up, it's a good time to consider moving that player on. But obviously,
you asked earlier what was one of the mistakes that a lot of people make in Dynasty. You just said it. The inability to sell high, right?
Yeah.
It's so hard. Like, who wants to sell high? I don't want to sell high. I want to keep high. Oh, the guy's good. I want to keep him. Everybody was trying to get off Amari Cooper and Terry McLaurin, after weeks 1 and 2. Now they're like, no, they're good. I'll keep them. It's like, now's when you sell them. Now's when you finally, anyway,
Yeah, that's true. It's true. You learn a lot of lessons along the way playing Dynasty for sure. For you, what are the biggest mistakes you've made, and what did you do to learn from them?
I've never made a mistake. I won't admit to any of them on this program. Don't think you're going to trick me with a question like that, Kevin. Come on now. Come on. I mean, I think a lot of it is, though, what I talked about in drafting players. I think you want to be that big outside X receiver, that whole thing, like just certain things we tell ourselves is to, anytime you're stuck in old thinking, rethink it again. Just rethink it again. I think, I've got a saying that I say on my show all the time. It's be ready to be wrong. So, embrace that you're probably wrong. Try and figure out how you're wrong. Try and figure it out. I always say the first one to figure out they're wrong is ahead of the curve. If we're all wrong on, I'll use N'Keal Harry, he's the punching bag, but like, he was a first round pick. He was a high end first round pick in the draft, and in the rookie drafts. And if you'd have been the first one to realize that he wasn't it, right, then actually you're now right first. So you know what I'm saying? So like the first one to be wrong is actually the first one to be right, because you can change course. And so it's super important in Dynasty to be able to do that and to see that coming and to really be willing to move off of certain positions that you've had so that you can adopt the correct one.
Yeah, so it's true. It's true for sure. Now, if you could give one piece of advice to new Dynasty managers, what would that be?
Advice? I'm not giving any Dynasty managers any advice.
Your league members are not listening.
Of course, no. Get them out of here. Advice? Oh my God. Yeah, I think when obviously if it's a new a new player, you got to just check those scoring lineups that are the roster settings, how deep everything is, all those ways to gain an edge, I think. And then, the one I just gave, which is be ready to be wrong, change first, be Bayesian, let new information change what you thought before. Like maybe you were fading Brock Bowers because he was a little bit smaller, which would have been, hey, that could have been a thing, that you could have been right there, but that's your position. Brock Bowers going to have a hard time adjusting because he's 6'3", 235 instead of bigger. I'm afraid. Da, da, da. Next thing you know, he's out there earning targets and running around and trucking people. You're like, okay, never mind, change. Let me get Brock Bowers, let me trade low, let me trade high, let me get him, so being as quick to move as you possibly can. Maybe you could have seen that in the preseason, which you did, by the way, and made a move before then, like whatever it is, right? Getting it right as fast as you possibly can so that you're as right as you can be for as long as you can be.
Hey, right there. That's great. Incredible stuff from Jax Falcone. I love that. Let's talk a little bit about, obviously we talked about your experience with the community. You want to get back out there to the expo. How excited are you for that?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, we had the Undroppables mansion. There was 8 of us, which was kind of fun. So there was a good contingency. We had a 4 a.m. drunk draft. We called it the Blackout Bowl. It's
That's
it was
awesome.
a lot of fun. So there's a lot of different ways to experience it. I definitely going to do a draft next year. Definitely going to do some other things to be involved more. I don't think I'll play in the Achilles Championship where I'm going to go out and play flag football and risk a popped Achilles.
We don't need that. We don't need that.
Shout
Just
out
ask Ray GQ. Yeah.
Shout out Ray G. But no, it's but maybe I can spin the ball a little bit with the boys over there.
Nice. Yeah. Well, Bob Lung puts on an incredible event out there at the expo. So if you've never been, highly recommend, because people that attend, they usually want to come back. So
yeah, and as a fan, you definitely are part of it. We're fans. That's what it is. So yeah, I would definitely go. You will be rubbing elbows with your favorite fantasy analyst. Whether it be JJ Zacharyson or Kevin Murray or Jax Falcone, right? Like I had a couple people just walk up to me and introduce themselves, and they introduce themselves, and then they would say their like Twitter name. And I'd be like, dude, I love you. You're awesome. And they're not they're not in the industry. They're not at all. And I actually, enjoyed meeting them almost as much or more because, there's a lot of passion there. It's very, very cool. So yeah, I'll second that emotion.
Nice. Well, let's dive in a few rapid fire questions.
Oh boy, here we go. These are the fun ones.
Yeah, let's go. What do you enjoy most about what you're doing in the industry right now?
The best thing about what we do is I have the freedom to do whatever the hell I want, and that's a lot of fun, so that's definitely it. The freedom to create as I wish. And, I think that's what people like about the show too, is that's I have no master, which is, usually a good thing.
For sure. What's your favorite time of the year on the Dynasty calendar?
Oh, come on. This is draft time. Just like you said, I'm a draft Nick, just like you.
There we go. What are your favorite hobbies and activities outside of sports?
I've got kids, so I basically watch kids do things and feed children. That's basically what I do, but I enjoy playing golf. I love playing poker. I like drinking on patios. Are you familiar with this?
No.
Yeah. You sit outside and drink.
That's amazing. That sounds sounds quite appealing. Got to try that out.
Highly recommend it.
What's your all-time favorite TV show?
That's a tough one, isn't it? What's the most popular answer given? I want to say Game of Thrones, but they let me down at the end. That was my favorite show I'd ever watched until they went yada 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 dragons, whatever.
Yeah. Game of Thrones definitely. The Office is definitely up there. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It definitely gets a lot of action on this show.
Yeah, I love Breaking Bad too. I couldn't stop watching Breaking Bad. It was so good. There's a lot of going. I love Curb Your Enthusiasm. One of my favorite shows for sure. There's a Leon on there, so that's a good show.
I love it. All-time favorite movie. What do you got?
Best movie of all time is Pulp Fiction. That's the best movie of all time. By the way, all my answers will be 1994. It's just 1994. That's the year. No, that's when I grad. That's when I was a young man. So of course everything is. But I have to give a shout out to Leon the Professional, which is my moniker. So
okay, there you go. Now, when you mentioned Pulp Fiction, Matt Kelly said Pulp Fiction once on this show. you got to have a conversation with him about Pulp Fiction, because it won't end. Like he goes deep into the woods on that show, and it's entertaining for sure.
I will. Pulp Fiction is the greatest movie of all time. I mean, you could argue, that Daniel Day-Lewis is the greatest actor of all time. You could also argue that Quentin Tarantino is the greatest director of all time. I'm not saying he is. I'm saying you could argue. I know there's Kubrick and a million different great directors, but I thought that, I mean, come on, like Inglourious Bastards, so good. I mean, he's so talented. Reservoir Dogs, he's amazing. So Pulp Fiction really stands atop.
There we go. How about a sports movie?
Hoosiers. You like Hoosiers?
Okay. Yeah, it's great. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Gene Hackman. That's an all-timer.
Absolutely.
How about your favorite band, artist, musician?
Well, that's a tough one too. I mean, 1994 just starts pouring through with like Pearl Jam, Nirvana, stuff like that.
Sure.
But
There you go.
I love the Grateful Dead. My son is 8 years old, and somehow or another, all we listen to is Dead and Company now.
Okay.
It's fantastic. I mean, some of you are nodding, some of you are like, dude, get this boomer off. Off, get him out of here. But yeah, that's what we're listening to now. I've got a 10-year-old daughter, so I've got to listen to all her crap. But somehow along the way, I've enjoyed Taylor Swift quite a bit. So I'm
I got an 11-year-old daughter. We went to the Eras tour for sure. So I'm full on Swiftie. So
good.
What are you most grateful for at this time?
Man, having an attitude of gratitude. I'm grateful for everything. What's the old saying? Maybe you've never heard it, but what if you woke up this morning with only the things you thank God for last night? You wouldn't have much, so make sure you count your blessings. Everything's a gift. So just have that attitude of gratitude. I'm totally grateful for absolutely everything, baby.
That's awesome. That's incredible. What advice do you have for people that want to get more involved in content creation in the fantasy space?
I would say follow your own path. One thing that we've shared, I've had, many people that have worked with the Undroppables, and I always tell them, look, you're going to get offers as soon as you come on to the team. You're going to get people pursuing you because, of course, they know what we are. They know that we, try and find people to, give them an opportunity. Well, as soon as they see that you're anything, you're going to be given an opportunity to do something else. I always just say, listen, you're not leaving us, but make sure you're going where you want to go. Make sure you're doing what you want to do. Make sure you're not just taking a job just to take a job. Make sure it's something that it fits what you want. That's the one thing I said I'm grateful for is that, I can do as I wish and create as I wish. That's kind of what our content creators are given the freedom to do. They're given the freedom to do it. I would just say get out there and do something, no matter what it is. Just write something, create something, do something, begin, so yeah, just start. And then as you get moving, just make sure you're doing it for all the reasons that you want. If you want to be one of there's those guys, like TikTok artists that it's awful content to me. It's awful.
Yeah. Sure,
awful.
Sure.
Like, it's like, here's the 5 players you need to be drafted. It's like, oh my God, I throw up every time I see it. I change it immediately, but somehow it finds my feed and they're probably making good money. If you want to be that guy, go do it. I couldn't tolerate myself as that person. I just couldn't. But no shade. I mean, maybe a little shade. I don't know if that felt shady or not. But like for me, not what I want to do. Would I want to make more money if I just not doing it. So I think that's what it comes down to. Make sure you're honest with yourself and follow your own path.
Authenticity. That wins every time, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything else that we haven't covered? We've covered a lot. Anything else we haven't covered before we
covered
close
everything.
Things out?
Political. Let's talk about the presidential race or something.
Who's going to win? Who's winning the election? No,
the American people will lose for sure. I think.
Yeah. That's undoubtedly true.
No matter what happens, we all lose.
I love it. Anything else we haven't covered? You want to share and obviously tell the listeners where they can find you.
No, man, this is a cool process that you had. I mean, you had a lot of great questions. I'm surprised we were able to get through it all. To be honest with you, you're such a great host. Very, very neat. I'd love to have you on anytime. My show, so I'll reach out to you. You're awesome. Great show. Thank you so much. You can find me on Twitter at Dino Game Theory. The show is The Undrafted. You can find it wherever podcasts are found, and theundroppables.com, or find us at The Undroppables on Twitter.
There you go, Jax Falcone. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Scott, it was a ton of fun. I can't wait to see what's next for you in 2024.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.